It's been more than 3,000 years since the boy pharaoh died, yet his tomb still holds secrets that could kill you. On November 6, 1922, British archaeologist Howard Carter discovered the entrance to the tomb of the boy king Tutankhamun in the Valley of the Kings. The discovery was a sensation. Newspapers around the world ran headlines announcing that the tomb of the lost pharaoh had been found. What no one knew at the time was that the headlines should have read, "Beware, the curse of the pharaoh is real," because ever since that day, everyone who has entered the tomb has suffered a terrible fate. It all began with a warning inscribed on the wall of the entrance to the tomb. It read, "The one who disturbs the sleep of the just shall himself be accursed." From ancient times until now, people have been afraid of disturbing the dead, believing they might wake up and take revenge on those who dare to awaken them. This fear led the Egyptians to place all kinds of curses on their tombs, but most were designed to scare away grave robbers rather than archaeologists. However, one curse seems to have targeted Carter and his team. Just 5 months after the discovery, on February 16, 1923, Carter's financial supporter, Lord Carnarvon, died of the bite of a mosquito. Although this was not a serious matter, the newspapers immediately wrote that it was a consequence of the curse. In fact, every single death that occurred near the dig site or in the nearby town of Luxor was attributed to the curse. But it didn't stop there. Within a few months, several other members of the expedition team also died under mysterious circumstances. One was the team's doctor, another a fellow archaeologist, and a third was the foreman of the excavations. Finally, even Carter's beloved pet monkey, who never left his side, suddenly died while he was out on an expedition. All these deaths shook the entire world. Was it really the curse of the pharaoh? Let's start with Lord Carnarvon, who was indeed bitten by a mosquito on his cheek while sitting on the veranda of his house. The wound became infected, which caused him to develop the blood clot that led to his death. But it wasn't anything unusual. It was a very common cause of death at the time, especially among men of leisure who spent a lot of time outdoors. Things get a little more complicated with the rest of the victims. The team's doctor, Dr. Theodore McSwain, suffered a heart attack while giving an interview to a London newspaper about the excavations at the dig site. However, he'd been suffering from heart problems for quite some time. He'd even mentioned it during an earlier interview, saying, "My position is a dangerous one. If I catch cold or influenza, I may not pull through." And sure enough, he caught the flu, which eventually led to his death. The second archaeologist, Richard Bethel, was run over by a truck while crossing the street in Cairo, while the foreman, George J. Gates, died as a result of inhaling toxic gases while trying to fix a broken water pipe. Yes, so far, none of the deaths seem to have anything to do with the curse. Still, we can't say the same about the monkey. It would be too much of a coincidence if a bunch of unrelated deaths just happened to occur around the dig site. There must have been something else behind it. Something powerful. Like a curse. It's hard to believe, but as strange as it sounds, curses really existed back then. Even today, there are many people who believe that the souls of the dead can find peace only when they are undisturbed, and if someone dares to disturb them, they will suffer terrible consequences. Of course, modern science does not take such beliefs seriously. Death, according to scientists, is irreversible, and no one can come back from it. So there's simply no way that anyone could have resurrected the boy pharaoh and unleashed his wrath upon the excavators. And yet, according to reports, strange things have happened at the site. Once, for example, a member of the Egyptian Antiquities Authority felt a ghostly hand grab his shoulder while standing before the sarcophagus. Then there was the time Carter saw the apparition of a man in linen clothes who looked at him reproachfully before disappearing into the darkness. Some people believe these apparitions were the spirits of the ancient priests who took their own lives to protect the pharaoh's tomb from grave robbers. Others believe it was the pharaoh himself. In fact, Tutankhamun doesn't seem like the type to take revenge on those who disturbed his eternal rest. Unlike his father, Akhenaten, whose violent death was prophesied centuries before it happened, or his grandfather, Tutankhamun, who slaughtered almost his entire family to secure his rise to power, Tutankhamun was known for his gentleness and kindness. When he came to power at the age of 9 or 10, he restored traditional Egyptian religion, moved the capital back to Thebes, and married his sister, Ankhesenamun. After his death, which occurred when he was 18 or 19, he was succeeded by his advisors, Ej and Horemheb. So why did Carter decide to open the tomb anyway? Well, it's because throughout history, there have been hundreds of stories about tombs of pharaohs that contained great treasures inside. It was said that Tutankhamun's tomb was no exception. Still, most archaeologists at the time tried to stay away from it, fearing the curse of the pharaoh. One of them, Louis Bourdon, later Director General of the Egyptian Antiquities Authority, said, "I know that many of my colleagues and friends would give a great deal if they could make the discovery, but they would not touch it for all the gold in Egypt. It would be better for them if the tomb remained closed." However, Carter decided otherwise. To be fair, he didn't believe in curses either. In fact, he said that stories about the pharaoh's curse are usually started by people who want to capitalize on the sensationalist side of archaeology. Still, he couldn't resist the temptation to open the tomb, and how glad we are he did. Otherwise, we'd never know what was inside. Tutankhamun's tomb turned out to be one of the richest archaeological finds in history. It contained over 3,000 priceless artifacts, including 135 tons of treasure. Imagine that. The tomb was full of jewels, gold items, chariots, furniture, weapons, and even food that the pharaoh would need in the afterlife. But maybe the curse of the pharaoh isn't limited to the tomb. Maybe its power extends beyond the walls of the burial chamber. Perhaps the curse only takes effect once you try to take something away from the tomb. Indeed, as soon as Carter began removing artifacts, strange things started to happen again. For example, shortly after the discovery, the staff noticed that the wooden beams holding up the ceiling began to collapse without any apparent reason. They were perfectly intact just days before, but now they were crumbling to dust. Then there were the bats. Apparently, dozens of them living in the tomb flew away the moment Carter opened it. As soon as they left, the temperature inside the tomb rose to a sweltering 40 degrees Celsius. On top of that, poisonous scorpions emerged from nowhere and began to crawl over the artifacts. But maybe these are just natural processes that happen to coincide with the opening of the tomb. Scientists tend to think so. They suggest that the bats flew away because they sensed danger, perhaps due to the increased human activity in the area. The sudden heat could have been caused by the evaporation of groundwater that had seeped into the tomb over the centuries. As for the scorpions, they probably lived in the Valley of the Kings for thousands of years, waiting for someone to stumble upon them. Nevertheless, scientists acknowledge that some inexplicable phenomena have been observed at the tomb of the young pharaoh. For example, despite being buried deep in the ground, flowers often bloom in front of the entrance to the tomb in the middle of winter. Is it magic or the curse of the pharaoh? It's up to you to decide. Personally, I think there's nothing supernatural going on here. I mean, the story of the curse is actually a perfect marketing ploy that helps promote tourism in Egypt. Just think about it. Do you think that before Carter's discovery, people knew where the tomb of Tutankhamun was? Most likely not. Why would they have cared? After all, he was just a minor pharaoh whose name wasn't even included in the Bible. But once the media started talking about the curse, everyone wanted to learn more about the boy pharaoh. People began visiting his tomb in droves and buying souvenirs with images of him. Overall, the curse of the pharaoh has certainly brought millions of dollars to the Egyptian government. Now, though, the authorities are starting to worry. You see, over the past 100 years, more than 3 million tourists have visited the tomb. That's an average of 30,000 visitors per year, and all of them have probably inadvertently spread bacteria and mold spores to the tomb. It's already caused significant damage to the paintings on the walls and the sarcophagus. And experts estimate that within 20 years the mold could destroy everything. So maybe it's time to close the tomb again, allowing the artifact to finally rest in peace? Or maybe it's better to keep it open for those who want to see the legendary curse for themselves. Share your thoughts.